The ever-contentious issue of team orders reared its ugly head in Formula 1 again as Mercedes asked Valtteri Bottas to move aside and allow Lewis Hamilton to win the Russian Grand Prix. Now, it was undoubtedly the right move as far as Lewis Hamilton's championship hopes were concerned, Sebastian Vettel only finishing third on a difficult weekend for Ferrari. Vettel himself said it was a no-brainer, but Mercedes don't seem so sure. Hamilton said he never wanted or expected the call. Team boss Toto Wolff was clearly conflicted by his decision to manipulate the outcome in this way. Your usual host, Glenn Freeman, can't be with us. He's on holiday, as you can see from the postcard he sent. And our usual F1 correspondents are in Russia and then directly en route to Japan for the next race. So, Stuart Codling joins me, Ben Anderson, to discuss team orders controversy in Formula 1 take 85. What did you make of that decision? Was Mercedes right? Was Vettel right? Was it a no-brainer to use team orders in that race?
I think sadly the answer to that has to be yes, and they did it in a kind of a blatant way rather than the subterfuge that we've seen from Ferrari, say, in recent seasons. So if you look back to Monaco last year, when it was pretty obvious that Kimi got stiffed out of the win there in a subtle bit of sleight of hand, I think we should probably try and engage some understanding or at least sympathy towards the situation Mercedes found themselves in, I suppose. When you look through that race, they did put themselves in a position where they had to enact team orders because Toto Wolff and James Vowles were discussing the price of fish or whatever at the precise moment Lewis Hamilton should have been pitting. So that put them on the back foot. And when Lewis had made his way past Vettel, he'd blistered his tyres in doing so. So at that point, they didn't really know whether Lewis would be able to get to the end of the race. So I suppose they were within their sort of operative boundaries, as it were, to say, OK, right, we need to move him ahead of Valtteri so that we can cover against making a possible extra stop. But then you have to say, why didn't they let them swap back later in the race? So you can understand why Bottas was disappointed. It's a very interesting photo at the end on the podium with him receiving his trophy and looking like, I think Woodhouse said, looking like a man who had gone searching for the leak in life's gas pipe with a lighted candle. And even Vladimir Putin's going, you were robbed there, mate.
Now, you mentioned the move that Hamilton pulled on Vettel in that race. The team orders robbed us potentially of a thrilling battle between those two, as Vettel stayed with Mercedes in that final stint. So do you think there's maybe a higher duty here for the teams to follow to the show? Because obviously if Mercedes had let Bottas win the races he would have done ordinarily, we could have seen an epic fight between the two title protagonists.
And it would have made the run-in towards the final races of the season that much more enticing. But obviously they have a set of commercial priorities that really cut against what we as viewers, fans, whatever, want to see. For Toto Wolff, it's a case of he has to nail down the championship, otherwise he has a board to answer to. And he was probably thinking about how he's going to explain his failure to the man with the luxuriant moustache back at Mercedes, rather than making it a great show for the fans. I think it's at times like this when they really do almost forget who really is the boss here, which is the fan, the person who goes, pays their ticket, takes the time out of the weekend to watch the race and actually makes the sport what it is. They are but actors on the stage.
And what about Bottas? Losing another victory, it must have been very demoralising for him. Is there a danger that Mercedes could be hurt by this later down the line, that Bottas won't really perform to his best, knowing that he's very much now playing second fiddle to Hamilton?
Very difficult to make that call, isn't it? Because he's been such a faithful number two at times, but also very competitive in his own right when he's secured pole positions and can lead from a dominant position. So I don't know, I can't really speak to his motivation because he's got a very good poker face. He certainly seemed very disappointed to have that taken away from him. But at the same time, he knew what he was signing up to when he joined Mercedes, which is that he needed to be a more compliant partner for Lewis Hamilton and not create the sort of slightly toxic atmosphere we've seen in the past few years.
Do you think there's been some cuteness in the way Mercedes has tried to handle this team orders game? It seems new to them. Obviously, they've been used to having Hamilton and Rosberg knocking 10 bells out of each other and not really facing threats from outside. But this season, they played Bottas against Ferrari to help Hamilton in the Italian Grand Prix, but tried to argue that it was in his best interest as well because it wouldn't have changed his race with Max Verstappen. And now they're saying, oh, we had to let Hamilton through because he had this blister that would have potentially ruined his race with Vettel, although that's debatable. Do you think they're struggling to handle this situation in terms of dealing with both the drivers and the impact it has on the race?
Yeah, they spin it nicely, don't they? And when Toto says after the race, "Oh, we really didn't want to do team orders," it would basically the gentleman doth protest too much. I think the only thing we can really say in their favour at the end is that they've waited until the tail end of the season to do this, whereas back in 2002, the Austrian Grand Prix was right at the beginning of the season. I think it was end of May. There is no need for Ferrari to make that call with Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello back then with a dominant car. There was no point in doing it then. Mercedes now with just a few to go and it having been quite a tight contest, you can sort of understand it, but you can understand it and not like it.
You mentioned Ferrari obviously used team orders in 2002 to much outcry from fans, and they used it this season as well, somewhat ham-fistedly, to help Vettel potentially win the German Grand Prix before he crashed. Is this something we just have to accept, given that it's such a close title battle between two top teams?
Yeah, I mean, no one really wants to accept that measure of crassness, but I think you kind of have to, because it's a sport where corporations are throwing millions at winning and they'll do anything to win. You would hope that Italian politics are known for their sophistication. We talk about Machiavelli back in the Renaissance writing very much the handbook for how to be devious and manipulative. You'd think
Wolf has it on the pit wall now.
Well, he's done a better job of reading it than Maurizio Arrivabene, who sort of goes into headless chicken mode at times like this.